With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Samach Vav. We had on Daf Samach Hey Amud Aleph in the bottom of the Amid a scenario expounding upon the case of the Mishnah Daf Samach Beis. Yom Kippur, we have the par, we have the so'ir already designated, and they get lost. That's the case of the Braisa. And we, the Beis HaMikdash, we designated another par or another so'ir to take its place. Prior to either of them being brought, the original one was found. So now we have two. We have an extra one. So says Rabbi Yehuda that the original one has to be left to die. And Enochanami, when you read the Braisa, it sounds perfect. Rabbi Yehuda l'shitase, like we learned in the Mishnah, that the halacha l'Moshe Messinai regarding the chatois hamesois is also when it comes to a chatos tzibur. So you have an extra chatos, it's left to die, but the challenge is, no, not so pashut. Because as we brought on Daf Samachei Amud Aleph Rava, explaining the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda and Shkolim, that Rabbi Yehuda holds that choyvois shel shana zu kerevois l'shana haba. So if you have an animal, and as we explained based on Shitas Rebbe, that the way we measure a year for Yomim Tovim is not necessarily the way we measure a year. Now when it comes to the din of that this chatos, this so'ir has to be 1 year old, it's possible for one to designate a so'ir this year. It's going to be at least 8 days old. Next year, Yom Kippur. For Yom Kippur, Yom Tov, it's next year. But as far as the age of the so'ir has to be within its year, it's still within its year. Since the way Rava understands Rabbi Yehuda, this animal is allowed to be brought, so why would Rabbi Yehuda say that the original so'ir has to be put to death? It's not it's not an extra chatos. Use it for next year. And we had a lot of back and forths, and we left off on Samach Vav Amud Aleph the final correct approach, that there's something called takala, that we are afraid of a mishap. And what that means is that if a person will have in their home, in their possession, an animal that taka belongs to Hegdish, or even in the Beis HaMikdash, it's an animal that's already mugdash, to keep it a whole year, there's a high likelihood that someone inadvertently will misappropriate it, will be moil. And by the way, we learned this din, we're going to repeat it again. Bachlal, nowadays means a moment before Mashiach. We believe that Mashiach is coming today. So can a person go ahead and say, this animal is harezu shlamim, Mashiach is coming? Or can a person take money and be magdish the money, and we will see that even though we believe Mashiach is coming today, you may not do it. Because you're not allowed to have in your possession something that belongs to Hegdish, while you might inadvertently misappropriate it. Now obviously when Mashiach comes, and there is a Beis HaMikdash, you are magdish something, but the Gemara will explain the difference. Because then you are involved in bringing it. But if right now you can't bring it, you have to wait, and you know that there's no issue of balmum, it's a valid carbon, you just need to wait to bring it. There's afraid of a takala, that's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says that it has to be put to death. And we will see that this concept of whether we make a gzeira because we are chayshin and l'takala is really subject to a machlokes tanoim. Now we will continue going through the avodah of Yom Kippur. So if you remember in the previous Mishnayos, we left off, the final step was the pouring of the mixed bloods on the Yesod. Right, whether the Yesod was like in our Mishnah on the Maravi side, whether we had over there Rashbi and Rabbi Yishmael, whether it's on the Daram side, even though really later Rabbi Yishmael was made to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But be that as it may, now if you remember, the two Seirim, the one that was slaughtered was taken Bein Ulam LaMizbeach. That's the way we learned. But the one that is La'azazel, also known as the So'ir HaMishtaleach, is still standing by Shar Niknoir, and we're going to continue learning in the Mishnayos exactly what was done and how was done and who was done with that So'ir HaMishtaleach. We're going to learn about the third and the final vidui that said, while the Kohen Gadol is leaning on the So'ir HaMishtaleach with both of his hands, with all of his koyach, we're going to learn various understandings of the word Ish Iti, as it says in Parshas Achrei Mos, that it was sent with a ish iti to be pushed off the cliff. What does the word iti mean? If we learn chitas, so Rashi writes in Chumash, it's the designated person. In other words, the person that's going to be the one taking that goat should, lachatchila, we'll see, it's not a b'di'evid, be designated prior to Yom Kippur. We'll see that ish does not have to be a kohen, but we will see that the word iti has also other meanings. And we're going to learn in the Gemara other meanings, as well as we'll quote a cheskuni that says unbelievable things regarding the meaning of ish iti. We're going to have a shita, which is not the way we paskin, that Shabbos we're not allowed to carry, which is why we need to find a solution. One would be an eruv. But there is a shita that holds that there's no issue with carrying, and therefore there's no need for an eruv on Yom Kippur. Now on Daf Samach Vav Amid Beis, these are Gavaldike Dafim. We're going to have many interactions with Rabbi Eliezer, the Tanach, in which a question was asked, and even though Rashi says he knew the answer, being that he never heard the answer explicitly from his Rebbe, he didn't want to say the answer. He only would say that which he heard, and the way the M.O. of Rabbi Eliezer of not responding. He couldn't say, I don't know, because he knew. He didn't want to give the answer. So there was an evasive way for him to respond. He would answer one question with another question. So we're going to cover many different questions. And there's a lot of agadata in that, including just that one of the questions that the Gemara is going to discuss, that why is it that we found that by the Egel Hazov, those who Nebuch fell into that sin, there wasn't a uniform punishment. If you read the Chumash properly, some people were killed b'sayif. B'chlal, avodah zarah should be b'skila. We'll deal with that also. But some of them were killed b'sayif, right? V'hargo ish achiv. Some of them died in a magefa, in a plague. Then some of them died in hidroikan, which is when they ground up the avodah zarah, they threw it into the water and they would drink it. And those people, many people died the way a soita would die. Why is it that there's 3 different types of punishments? Chavre, and much, much more. Let us start on Daf Samach Vav Amid Aleph, again 6 lines from the top of the Amid all the way at the last word in the line. We're trying to understand why Rabbi Yehuda, even though Rava is correct in saying elsewhere that Rabbi Yehuda holds that choyvois shel shana zu kerevois l'shana haba, that Rabbi Yehuda says that when you have 2 seirim, one of them was lost, so you designated a new one. Then you found the original one, that the original one is put to death, the original one, Chevra Dafka, because Rabbi Yehuda, L'kula Alma, even according to Rav, holds that Balachayim Nidachim. So not only may it not be used, but Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow the Yira Ache Yistov. But why not, in this case, use it for next year? Ella, Amaravam, Gezeda Mishum Takala. That there's a concern of a takala, of a mishap. And a concern of a mishap justifies leaving the animal to die. And where do we find that? So here it says, the Tnan and Nachamol, this is a Detanya. Guys, we learned this in Shkolim, at the end of Shkolim. It says in a Braisa, Ein Magdishin. A person today meaning when there's no Beis HaMikdash yet, may not consecrate any item. This is not only because there's no Mizbeach. Stam, you have in your house something that's Hegdish, but you can't give it to Hegdish yet. Likewise, ve'ein ma'arichin, another detail. Ma'arichin is the whole sugi at the end of Parshas Bechukoisai, that a person could make a statement that erki olai or erkecha olai, and based on age and gender, the Torah prescribes a specific amount. Now, when a person makes this declaration, ein ma'arichin, we don't say, just to make it clear, that since we are afraid of a takala, don't give the money that you're mechoyev to give. Don't designate, we can't say that. Because takala is a worry midrabanan. When a person makes an erech vow, they have to fulfill that which they said. So if a person were to make an erech vow before the Beis HaMikdash is built, he'll have to designate the money. So then again, he'll have in his home money that belongs to Hegdish. Or similarly, ve'ein machrimim, that's another type of temple designation. Now there are pratim to that. If you remember, there's chermei kohanim, chermei gavoya. Giving something to kohanim could be done by using the word chedim. Don't get confused. Chedim sometimes is used in a complete different context. But chedim here means I'm giving something to gavoya. And whether stam chedim is legavoya, whether you have to specify chedim lashem, the Braisa here is speaking about chedim to God. So the Braisa says, don't do it bizman hazeh meaning before we have a Beis HaMikdash. Furthermore, ve'im higdish, If a person violated this derabanan or veherich, he made that declaration. And l'kula alma, you made the declaration, you got to fulfill it. Fulfilling it, step number one will be designating the money that the Torah says you owe, and that will be the money that now will belong to Hegdish, but it's going to be under your roof. Or vehecherim. So what says the Braisa, you have to now get rid of that which you designated. Appreciate how by the ma'arichin it's different than magdishin and machrimin, because by when I'm magdish something, this is hegdish, so then this is already hegdish. When I'm marich, I'm making a verbal vow. One would think, so then don't designate the money. That's not an option. You have to designate the money because and now you got a problem because you have money that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash or vehecherim. So if it's a behema tei aker, uprooting it, it doesn't mean like castrating it. We'll see. It means to leave it to die. You have to destroy it. It cannot be in the world, according to this Tana. Peiros ksus v'kelim, whether it's produce, whether it's garments, whether it's utensils, but non-metal that just deteriorate on their own, then yirkavu, then allow it to decompose. But hold on, many items are made out of materials, let's say metal, that they don't decompose. So ma'ois, which is made out of metal, klei matrois, metal utensils, then either the version here is yoylech hana'al liyamamelach, which will be difficult to understand. That would mean that you should take the value of the benefit and throw it into yamamelach, or other have actually the girsa yoylech liyamamelach. That's the, destroy it. Now, furthermore, ve'ezehu ikr, that's not clear. Uprooting, what does it mean? It means noyel delas lefaneo v'himeisa me'aleo. And that explains the Braisa of Rabbi Yehuda. Rava is correct, the way he explains Rabbi Yehuda Shita b'negei Ashkalim. It could be Kerevos L'shana Haba. It's Shayich that the animal will be B'toich Shenasai, even by the Sa'ir. Why do you have to mamish tamus, whatever the lashon of Rabbi Yehuda was? Why? Because of takala, and that justifies not only yidu achi yistoavu. No, tamus, leave it to die. Now the Gemara wants to understand. Let's just bring it down. B'poil takala damai. What exactly are we afraid of? In other words, the Beis HaMikdash will have an extra sa'id. What are you worried about? I takala dahakrava. Takala means that you're going to actually offer it. Somehow they're going to take this, you go and offer it. Well, if that's the problem, we got a big question on this. Every time, not chatos, every time we have this concept that a behema that was already imbued with kedushas mizbeach, and for some reason it's now invalidated. So the rule is you can't even sell it right away. You have to first wait until it gets blemished. Another rule is you're not allowed to make a blemish be a dayim. So yiru ache yistoavu. Why aren't we always afraid? If yiru ache yistoavu, until it gets a blemish, maybe takala, maybe someone is going to offer it. Doesn't that prove that we're never afraid of a takala? All of the yiru ache yistoavus is only allowed because we're not afraid, or we don't say that maybe some kohen what is going to make by accident will bring it as a carbon. So then all the animals should be put to death. Afilu kolri iyo isnami. So maybe it means not that someone is going to bring the animal, but someone is going to actually use it. Itakala digizav avoidam. And this is a soyer that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. But not even, and someone might shear the animal and use the hair, or someone is going to work with the animal, still the same kasha. Afilu kolri iyo isnami. You know, it's by kachim, how many times did we learn? Yiru ache yistoavu. That in itself proves that no one is chayish letakala. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a kasha. La'olam, first of all, the takala can mean that they will actually bring it as a carbon. No one in the Beis HaMikdash is going to shear an animal that's not blemished. But everyone in the Beis HaMikdash is constantly bringing karbanos. They might take this carbon. How can you ever have yiru ache yistoavu? V'hanach, the lav b'nei hakrava ninhu, anytime an animal became invalidated, why yiru ache yistoavu? Anywhere, always, because there is a psul. So everyone knows this animal cannot be brought. And therefore, loitared buhu. No one is preoccupied with it. Fakert, you're not preoccupied, you're not guarding it. You're not making an effort for it not to become puzzle because of a mum, for it not to become invalidated for any other reason. You know it can never be brought. So over there, we're not afraid that you're going to bring it. It's, in English, out of sight, out of mind. It remains out of sight because no effort is needed to keep it wholesome. But if the din would be that this soir, the original soir that you found, According to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rava, you can bring it next year. Well, there's going to be a certain amount of care that you'll be giving the animal to make sure it stays unblemished. You're going to treat it the way you treat an animal of kachim. There's a much greater chance that someone by mistake will offer it as a carbon. Tanach, this soid of Yom Kippur, since the Basa Kravehi, because the taka has no invalidation. That's the whole point. It was lost and it was found. It doesn't become invalidated. It's good for next year. So Taridba, people are preoccupied in it. Let's make sure this animal is good. It's going to go on the Beis HaMikdash. So here, there's a possibility that a takala will happen, which is that a kohen will accidentally offer it as a carbon. And that's enough of a fear, even though Kahana Marzirizim, that Thomas. Now the Gemara just wants us to know that takala atzma. Are we afraid of a takala? This concept is really subject to a machlokes tanoim. This is not a problem. This is just a fact. And we're gonna bring a braisa. We're going to try to show that the braisa lav dafke is because of the machlokes, whether you're chayish letakala, but we will succeed indeed in proving that takala is a machlokes tanoim. We learned in one braisa, Pesach shalei karav barisha, and you designated the Pesach, an animal. And for whatever reason, the animal was not brought to Pesach Rishon. For whatever reason. So, yikrav b'sheni. Yikrav b'sheni means bring it on. Now there's details. Bring it on Pesach Sheni. Hold on. If I brought my Pesach Rishon, I will not bring a Pesach Sheni. That's not a problem. We already learned that so many times. Since this animal was designated the Pesach, let me find someone that was Tamei, that was B'derech Rechoika. Let me find someone else that has to bring a carbon Pesach Sheni, and let me have that person buy this animal. He anyways has to buy an animal. This animal was already designated for Pesach. Buy the animal. But basheni, and if sheni means if it was not brought to Pesach Sheni, so yikrav l'shana haba. Now the point is that once an animal was already designated for a carbon, use it as a carbon. Now l'chayri, here again, what about takala? 1 second. Avatanya idach lo yikrav, but it says in another place. So no. From Pesach Rishon to Sheni, don't wait for next year. And my love, betakala pligi. My lapatakala pligi, that's the machlokes. So the Gemara says that's not a raya. Loy. Because maybe I would argue the kula alma loy chayshinam letakala.
It has to be Shem Pesach, has to be for Korban Pesach.
Yeah, that's the whole point. That since I designated the animal for a Korban Pesach, we would prefer for it to remain a Korban Pesach. Now, even though there's other solutions, right, Shlomo, we just had this not long ago. That means that there's a rule that Pesach Shalei Bezmanoi, whether you have to uproot it purposefully or whether automatically it becomes a Shlomim, it could be offered, but it's better to use it as a Pesach. The question is whether you can use it for a Pesach or not. And the Gemara says that maybe, both of these Tanoim hold that loy, we read the brackets, loy chashin letakala. You know why the second Braisa says that you can't bring it? It means you can bring it next year because next year, a carbon Pesach, which can be either a lamb or a goat, they have to be within their first year. Next year, if it's next year Pesach, then isn't it beyond the year? So that is what we said. Now we found by Bata Yerachayim that the Rebbe holds that Yom Tov is always a lunar Yiddish calendar, but for other Dinei Torah, could be for this, we go by a solar Seder. Maybe that's the machlokes. Whether it's shayach for it to be within the year, next year Pesach. Maybe the Rebbe v'Rabbanan komifligi and v'loy kasha. This is all an explanation that Rebbe, which is why it still could be within its year. That's the first braisa that says bring it next Pesach, and the second braisa that says don't bring it follows the Rabbanan. So the Gemara counters, no. It is a machlokes tanoim because ve'hatanya, the continuation of this braisa says vechein hamois. Now hamois, Rashi clarifies. Hamois means same thing by Pesach. If I designated money for carbon Pesach, and for whatever reason I didn't use the money for a carbon Pesach, so then the same thing, use the money to buy a carbon Pesach Sheni. If it wasn't used for Pesach Sheni, use it for next year. The other braisa says don't use it for next year. Now you can't say that the reason why you can't use the money for next year is because it's beyond the year. You didn't buy the animal yet. So Taka, why shouldn't you use it? It makes sense. You have money. It's already designated for Pesach. Use it for next year's Pesach. The only answer would be because of Takala. Even Bizman Shabeis HaMikdash Kayim, you don't want to have in your drawer money a whole year that is designated for a carbon, someone during the year might, by mistake, might be moyel on the money. Elalav shmamina, that this fear of takala or not is indeed a machlokes tanoim shmamina. And now, Chavra, let's start. Continuing our journey through the avodah of Yom Kippur. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam kol yom v'dvarim. Okay, so we finished the last avodas hadam of the big day lovin. Now the Kohen Gadol is going to go back to Shad Niknar, which is where he stood when he made the goydel originally by the two seirim. The Sa'ir La'azazel is live and well. We did learn details, how they wrapped a red band around it. We learned that they turned it facing the exit, so it was already facing the east. And Boloi Eitz Soid HaMishtaleach, he goes to the Soid that's going to be dispatched, or to the dispatched goat, he-goat. And the Soid Mechtei Yadav Olav. And Umesvada, that's the third time he's saying a vidui. And Vakachoya Oimer, Ana Hashem. This is a good opportunity to chazer. So here again we have two girsa'os, whether it's Chatu Avu Pashu. Remember? Chatu, this is Taka Aseder, Milmata Lamayla, not the way the Mishnah said before. Chatu means Bishoigig, Avu means willingly, but not lahachis. L'tayavan, willingly. A pashu means a rebel, not because I even had a yetzer hara. God forbid. God said, "Hey, I'm going to rebel. I'm going to do B," and it's machaper for all those avedas. The question is only whether it's from the least serious to the most serious, which is chatu avu pashu, or do we had it in the Mishnayos above, avu pashu chatu. And remember that, and what's the logic? It's out of Seder that we hope that through tshuva, the pshia should at least go down to become like a shoygig. And that's the two levels of tshuva, that nasaloi kish gagois, and then we'll learn at the end of this mesechta that even a greater tshuva, mi'ava, will transform it into zachiyos. But be that as it may, so he specified all these three types of categories, but who sinned? By the first vidui of the par, it was only the Kohen and his household. Remember? The second vidui on the same par later was the Kohen Gadol and his household and all of his brethren Kohanim. Here, Lefanecha Amcha Beis Yisrael, he doesn't even specify the Kohanim. Now, whether this is effective for the Kohanim as well or not, we already learned that above. That's a machlekes Tanoim. We'll read it again soon in the Gemara. Oh, Kevin has a picture. So the picture is good. Good. There's no blindfold, but the red string is ganz good. Now, and on Hashem, remember we learned that also above. The first on Hashem, the second on Hashem, the second honor made more sense. The first honor we had lemudim for it. That on Hashem, kaperna, another machlekes rishonim. Finally, whether Hashem was Yudkei Vavkei or whether this Hashem was already Shem Mab. Kaperna lachatoyim v'lavoynos v'lapeshoyim. Here again, it's consistent. Or the Seder would be kaperno lavoynos lapeshoyim ulachatoyim. Shechatu, here again. Follow whatever the Seder of the Mishnah is, it's always the same. Shechatu v'shavu shepashal lefanach amcha beis Yisrael. Kakasu b'seiras Moshe avdecha leimoir. A pasuk in achri mois. Ki bayoyim hazem yichaper aleichem latayreschem. B'kol chatoisechem. Lifnei havaya titharu. And now says the Mishnah a detail that we did not have, not on Lamed Hey Amud Beis, the first vidui of the Kohen Gadol for his own sins. This is not written on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis, second vidui on the par, but in the Machzir, the Nusach of the Mishnah here was also put in the first and in the second vidui as well. Now, why didn't Rabbeinu HaKadosh write the same thing above? That's a big discussion. And by the way, not everyone agrees that what we're reading over here, v'hakoyanim v'ha'am, was said before. But let's go read. V'koyanim v'ha'am, ha'oimdim ba'azara. We have Tzvika, we have Rabbi Shalom, let's see. We have all of the Balei Tefilla over here. K'shoyeshoymim, shem ha'mafayde, shehoyoytzim epi koyin gadol, ha'yakoyrim, u'mishtachvim, v'noifrim ha'pleim, v'oimrim, baruch shem kaved malchus elo olam v'ad. And take a look at the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Hey. All it says is, v'oimrim baruch shem. But that's something that's not written there. Again, in our nusach, we say the ganze. We even say every time that they take a said Baruch Shem. And our minig is that we take a neiflim al paneim, at least the men by us, not the way they did it in the Beis Hamikdash, but at least to get on the knees and on the head, with all of the pratim, that there may not be a stone floor outside the Beis Hamikdash, and if there is a stone floor, then you have to put something that interposes between the forehead and the floor, which is the origin, the source of why when we do tachlin every day, we don't even put our head on our hand. We have something to make a chatzitza. So our minig is we use a talis. Remember, as a bachar, I think we used our tefillin. You can use your jacket by mincha. All of that is that if there is a ritzvah shalavanim, there's a psa'isur midoiraisa, not to prostrate on a stone floor outside the Beis Hamikdash. Many shuls, now it's much easier because today you have the most beautiful tiles that they look like stone, that they're not stone, they're ceramic, and then you don't have to put anything. Okay, weiter. Now that he finished the vidoi, the Kohen Gadol would give this higot to the one which we'll call soon the ish iti, the pshat, the designated person, the person that's going to be leading the higot to the cliff, to push it off the cliff. Who is that person? Zok the Mishnah, hakoil kishedim lo elichai. Hakoil means even a non-kohen. However, av ella sha'asu hakoyanim gedolim keva. Now others are not gedolim. There was like a fixed rule that were made by the kahanim or by the kahanim gedolim. This is not even like a gzeira, but they made up that what that novel hoyu manichem es Yisrael lo'ilichai. No, we're keeping this in the house. A kohen is going to be the one taking it. Rabbi Yosi. Now there's two opposite ways of understanding Rabbi Yosi. But let's read the words. Amar Rabbi Yosi, Maise, I remember, or I have a tradition, that I have a tradition. V'hoilichoi Arsala. Arsala took the Seir HaMishtalech. And who was Arsala? He was a non-Kohen. Now, one way of learning the Pshat is that Rabbi Yosi is arguing that the Tanach holds, they made a keva, they made as a rule, it cannot be a non-Kohen. No, says Rabbi Yosi. I remember Arsala took it. Or Punt Fakert. The Tanach is not saying that they made as a Gzeira de Rabbanan. They made up, Chevra, let's send a Kohen. But even they didn't change the rule. They left it in Torah that a non-Kohen is also valid, and as a raya that once happened. Now, if Rabbi Yosi is not arguing with the Tanach, and it's not that there is a Gzeira, but it would be better to bring a Kohen. Why would they send a Yisrael? We'll speak out of Cheskuni in a few lines from now. The Cheskuni is not mentioned in the Gemara. The Cheskuni quotes a Midrash. We just have this. If I have a Makras Gedoyles, the Cheskuni is all the way in the back. Or maybe you have the newer versions, the big red ones, you have everything written on the page itself. And according to that, we'll see why Taka one time they sent a Yisrael. Another detail. Just like we learned that when it came to so far the 9 times, well, the first time doesn't count, that's Moshe Rabbeinu, that was in the Midbar, but the 8 para adumas that were slaughtered, Bisman Shebeis HaMikdash Hoyakayim, that there was, remember, the ramp, they made the Kohen Gadol pay out of his own pocket, because they didn't use the previous Kohen Gadol's ramp. So here there's another ramp, that they would build a ramp, the Kevesh Asuloi, they would build a ramp, or let's call this a elevated walkway. They're not going to build a Brooklyn Bridge with suspension bridge. I mean, it's expensive. But they build some sort of kevesh on which the ish iti, the designated man, kohen, not kohen, with the Seir HaMishtalech would go out of that whole area. Now, how far did the ramp go? It doesn't say. The goal of the ramp was to keep people away from this ish iti. They made a shvil in our nusach. Why did they make a shvil? So when you go off our kafis, you don't get crushed in the middle. The people would harass the ish iti. Mipnei habavliyim. What did the Babylonian Yidden do? We're calling on the Bavliyim. Shahoyu metalshin bisaroi. They would pull out the hair of the ish iti by making him rush. We had a similar minig in 770 when the Baal Tefilla was kratzing. They would do other things to him just to make him go quicker. So they would pull out his hair. Now, pulling out the hair is a violation. Now, that's just an ironic thing, that when you're trying to get someone to be more quick, be a bigger zaris, sometimes the one who's advocating zrizus is violating an isur. But what happened was they would pull out his hair and say, toil v'tzei, get moving. Toil v'tzei, kratz nicht. And they would push it, harass him. They would pull out his ear. So they built a ramp, so people should not be able, those Babylonians, we'll see in the Gemara, we'll have time today, how many people came from Bavel, and they were not so happy with the words that the Bavlim, all of the Yidden of Bavel are being attacked, oy gewalt. Anyways, this is, we'll get to that on Amud Beis. All right. Point number one is that when the Kohen Gadol made now the third vidui, he didn't say, Aniyu Beisi and the holy Kohanim, Am Kedushecha, and all the Yidden. He just mentioned all the Yidden. Says the Gemara, V'ilu b'nei Aharon Am Kedushecha, which is what we had on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis by the second vidui. Here it's not written, which l'cha'oret means, l'cha'oret, that's the first understanding. That the Kohanim did not get atonement from the Soira Mishtaleach. All of their atonements was separate, was from the par. So, if that is the pshat, then who is the author of our Mishnah? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah and not Rabbi Yehuda. Because, guys, we had this on Samach Aleph. Because the Ikir, Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amar yesh lahem kapara b'seira mishtaleach. That was the whole point. That the seira mishtaleach, we learned about the unique Tumas Migdash U'Kedashav, Ayin B'daf Samach Aleph. And that was taka different, that the Kehanim got kapara and the Yisraelim got kapara from the different animals. But here, for Shar Avedis, everyone got it together. And he understands, Rabbi Yirmiyah, that by the fact that he didn't specify B'nei Aharon Am Kedushecha, it means that they did not get atonement by the avoid of the Soira Mishtaleach. However, Abaye disagrees with Rav Yirmiyah. And he says, well, just because the Kohen Gadol didn't specify B'nei Aharon Am Kedushecha doesn't mean that they were not included. It means the opposite. It means that everyone got kapara. If everyone gets kapara, but a Kohen is not a Yid, all the Yidden. Fakert, that's what he said. He said that Amcha Beis Yisrael, Afilu Temer Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the Soira Mishtaleach for Shar Avedas was machaper for everyone, for the Yidin, for the Kahanim, for the Leviim, for the Yisraelim, because Otui Kohanim Lav B'chlal Amcha Yisrael Ninu. So it's interesting, Machlokas Amoraim, how do we view Kohanim? It comes that Rabbi Yirmiyah holds that Kohanim are like a mamish in a sug b'fnei atzmai. And even if they are to be included by the vidu, you would have to specify them separately. And the fact that you don't is because our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda, it's like Rabbi Shimon. Okay, weiter. And as the Mishnah began by saying it doesn't need to be a kohen, it's only that according to the Tanach, that the kohanim or the kahanim gedolim, they made a keva. They established a rule. So says the Gemara, Tanach Rabbanon. Now, guys, this is Vayikra Tezayin Pasuk Chaf Aleph. That's where the Torah says that v'hisvada olav es kol avonos b'nei Yisrael, etc. V'nosan oisam. Oisam means the sins. Al roish hasoir v'shilach biyad ish iti hamidbara. So ish, says the Braisa, is to tell you that even a non-kohen is good. That's why the Torah says ish. Iti, before you turn the page, again, just an oligus. In Chumash Rashi, iti means designated, and that will be the Chazal in our Gemara. However, just a quote, the Rashbam says, iti means ish habaki b'drachim u'b'midbaris. Notice he needed to go to the Azazel. How do you get there? And now you're fasting. So ish iti means the man who knows the paths of the desert, who knows how to get there. The Cheskuni writes, and I'm quoting the Cheskuni, that Isa b'medrash, iti, from the word ace, a person whose time has come. Shehigiyas manoi lamus toich oisashana. This is very important. Many people know half of this medrash. They understand that whoever was the one who led the soir lazazel, that person died that year. They got it the opposite way. No, it's not that the taking it to the azazel caused them to die that year. They found a person who's anyways going to be dying that year, and they gave to him the soir lazazel. Because the one who's going to take a lazazel normally would die that year. So why give it to a yid that was predestined to live that year? Now how would you know who was already destined to die that year? So the last words of the Midrash that the Cheskuni quotes is V'chachmas hamazolois hoisa kala be'eneim. Understand what it is. I understand. There's two ways that I can understand it. But let's say Chachmas Mazolos Hoyakala B'Neim. The pshat, the way I understand this, is that there were people that through the Chachma of Mazolos, and normally we don't follow it, and Ein Mazali Yisrael. This is a problematic. We have to understand. But they knew through a certain Chachma that Chaim Yankel is not going to live the whole year. So they would dafka choose that person because anyways he's not going to live that year. The man whose time is up. If that, according to this Midrash, now it makes sense. Let's say that Rabbi Yossi is not arguing with the Tanakama. Yeah, the Kehanim Gedolah made a rule, only give it to Kehanim. But what happens if, thank God, at least by the Kehanim, these people that knew the future, who's going to live, who's not going to live, there was not a single Kohen that was destined to die that year. Shaykh. So if that would happen, huh? That's why they sent Arsala. Okay, so let's go over here. Iti samach vav amid beis. Pshat number one is, that's Rashi in Chumash. The designated has a meaning. Designated means is that we don't decide on Yom Kippur who's going to do it. Who wants to take it? No, it means that prior to Yom Kippur, designate a person, you're going to be the one taking it. And it goes with all the other pshatim. Why would they designate that person? Like the Rashbam, because he knew how to get there. Like the Midrash, if you know that he is anyways predestined to pass. Sheyiyah mizuman. But the Brais says mamshech that's not the only iti we can darshan in many ways. Sometimes we darshan the words many ways, sometimes we don't. This is not a machloikis. Nachadrasha. Iti, here iti means time. The time, it has to be done on a timely fashion. Even on Shabbos. Now, why would you think that on Shabbos you should not do the Soida Mishtalech? The Gemara will explain. It means even if Shabbos somehow might challenge this Avodah, do it anyways. Do it on the right time. Similarly, iti, again, from Ace, not mezuman, but timely, vafilo betuma. The Gemara is going to explain again what tuma issue might have made you think that you can't do it. What's the issue? Says the Gemara, let's go to the first. The Braisa says ish means lahachshed es hazor. You need to have a pasuk to tell you that even a non-kohen can do it. The Gemara doesn't understand. No, I get it that ish taka means even a zor. Ish means not b'nei Aharon. But why, if the Torah would write nothing, why would you even think you need a kohen? For Hashem to need to write a word to tell you even a zor. Pshita. This is not shchita, this is not ilacha, this is not Kabbalah, this is and I'll go more than that. What did we learn yesterday or 2 days ago? That at least L'shitas Rabbi Yehuda, that even the vidui on the Soira Mishtaleach is not essential. And therefore we said, pushing him off the cliff is for sure not essential. Then the kasha is even more. That means we needed to have the Soira Mishtaleach while you do the Avodas Damim. Right? Good. So answers the Gemara. The Tema, since the Torah does say regarding pushing off the Soira, the word kapara, it brings kapara. So anything that affects atonement, you would think that you need to have a kohen. Since kapara ksiv bei, voste gemeint, it has to be a kohen. That's why the Torah needed to write ish, because de facto it does not have to come through a kohen. Weiter. The Braisa says iti, the second understanding, not designated but timely. Vafilu b'Shabbos, fragt die Gemara lamai hilchas notes. How can chilul Shabbos somehow make you think, don't lead the sword to the cliff? Guys, we learned Masechta Shabbos. Not only can you lead an animal, the animal cannot be carrying anything, right? That would be machamer. Shvisas behemtoi. But leading an animal, we not learned in the Mishnah that if an animal goes out, remember b'shir, with a leash, you can walk it on a leash. With the pratim, the leash cannot be sticking out of your hand. The tefach from the other side, it can't be dragging on the ground. There's no isur over here. What's the problem? Answers the Gemara. Amar Absheshis loymar. That shafim hoyachayla goes on the goat. The goat got sick. The goat ain't walking. So you're gonna have to carry the goat. So that's the word. Do it. This trumps Shabbos. MERCAVA yal kseifai. Afilo b'Shabbos. So now the Gemara has two comments, very important comments. First of all, if you remember, we had Chitas Rebbe Nosson that says Chai noisas atzmai. Chai noisas atzmai, my friends, doesn't mean that on a Bible that midrabanan you can carry, but it means on a doiraisa level, any human being, according to Reb Nosson, not only a human being, even animals, since they help you carry them, you're not violating Hoitzah midoiraisa. Now, even according to Reb Nosson, there is a Isur Hoitzah midrabanan, but you can't have a word in the Torah that's iti, even on Shabbos, if on a biblical level, even if the animal would be choila, you are allowed to carry it. So is a raya that our Braisa is not like Rab Nosson, Seder. Don't forget, what would Rab Nosson use for iti? I don't know, mezumen, iti like the Rashbam, iti like the Chizkuni. You have different approaches. Command like Rab Nosson, because the Rab Nosson ha'amar haltoch that chay noises atzmai. Says the Gemara, no. I will argue that this Braisik even follows Shitas Rab Nosson. And chay noises atzmai, but when does Rab Nosson say chay noises atzmai? When the person or the animal are healthy, so they help you carry them. But if an animal is ill, remember in Shabbos we had a concept of an animal being tied up, or a person being tied. If the animal is ill, then even according to Rab Nosson, you may not carry this animal midoirais. I feel that Rab Nosson choloshani. And what's the whole thing over here? That maybe if the he-goat gets ill, if the he-goat is ill and it doesn't have koyach to walk, then we will hold, this shita holds, that even Rab Nosson holds it's also midoiraisa. No, it's not a mum. Very good. No. Shkoya, who asked that? That's a very good point. Yeah. That's the whole point. In other words, we learned in the Rambam I think the 70 mumen, whatever the mumen are, it's not choyla that you can't walk. Rabbi Chaim is also pointing out it's not called treif. We just learned this not that long ago for those who learn Perikach Hadoyim. It's taka not called treif. If an animal is very sick, they would check it quickly. It's sick. Tomorrow it's going to die. It's not from the treifus. It's not called a balmo. You don't have to check someone. It could be it got corona. You got a machla. It's going to get better. It's going to get better in 2 weeks. Okay, weiter. Now here Rav Rafram has a gewaltige chap. We had. I don't remember, Danny. You can English. All right. You know what, Danny? Check it up later. Check it up later if we had this. I'm sure we had this over there. The fact that you have two shitas here. Omar Afram. Now he makes such a good point. Hold on, my friends. The way we're noyig, Yom Kippur is Shabbos Shabbosin. We don't carry on Yom Kippur. In other words, why would he say iti afila b'Shabbos? What did he say? That if it will be choyle, then on Shabbos you would have thought you can't do it because there's an Isur Daraisa. Well, 1 second. Why afila b'Shabbos? He should have said iti. Even if the animal is sick, because if the animal is sick, even if Yom Kippur is on a Tuesday, on a Monday, who cares? We cannot carry on Yom Kippur. Is that ayah that the author of this Braisa holds that there is no Isur Otzah on Yom Kippur? The only thing would be that if Yom Kippur falls on Shabbos, mitzat Shabbos, you would not be allowed to carry, and for that Hashem needed to write iti. Amar Afram Zoysoy Meres that our Braisa holds Eruv v'Hoitzah, they're the same thing. If there's an Isur Hoitzah, then you need an Eruv. If there's no Isur Hoitzah, then you don't need an Eruv. Is only a problem, and therefore the Eruv is a needed solution for Shabbos, but you don't need an Eruv because there's no Isur of Hoitzah on Yom Kippur. If not, the Braisa would have says, iti afilu b'choili. Don't mention Shabbos. It's every Yom Kippur. And a chanami. Okay. Now, next, it says the final limud of iti was iti even betuma. Same kasha. Lamai hilchas. In other words, lamai hilchas means what scenario could come about that one might have thought, for tuma, don't do it. So for that, the Eibishter has to say, even though there's tuma, do it anyways. Amar Rav Sheishis Loimar, she'im nita mishalchoi. We just said iti means mezuman. And as we learned to Braisa, it's not one or the other. Iti means many things. So first of all, establish that ideally, it's not ma'akev. Whoever's taking this so'ir was predestined. We need to use him. Another detail that the Gemara takes it for given. The Kohen Gadol, even though later we learned on the break, he would walk out and talk to the Adon over there in the market, but during this moment, he is in the temple complex. The Kohen Gadol is the one that gives it to the Ish Iti, which means that the Ish Iti has to enter the temple complex. He has to enter Shar Mikveh. He enters the Azara. Now there is a rule that if a Yid is Tameh, he may not enter the Makam HaMikdash. Now it can't be the animal. There's no tumah by an animal. It's on the mishalchay. A Yid can become Tameh. That she'im nita mishalchay, nevertheless nichnas Tameh la Azara. That's a big gavaldik thing. And once he removes it, there's no issue. But the fact that he can enter the Azara, for that you need to have an itim. All right, now we are beginning. This is a phenomenal shtickle Gemara. We have a record of various questions that were asked to the Tana Rabbi Eliezer. They're related to what we just learned. And we're going to read a Rashi inside. Rabbi Eliezer knew at least some of the answers, but Rabbi Eliezer had an ethic. If he did not hear that din specifically from his Rebbe, he would never say it. But he would not tell people, oh, I never heard it from my Rebbe. He would evade questions by asking another question. That was his MO, and let's go read it inside. Sho'alos Rabbi Eliezer. Our case, you have a soid, hamishtaleyach. The soid became chala. It's not walking. So they asked him, Ma'u shi'arkiveu al kesefoi. Now I want to add something. This kasha was asked to Rabbi Eliezer maybe not only b'Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer could be subscribes to the way we paskin that one may never carry on Yom Kippur. So this is a general Yom Kippur question. So Amar Lohem. So how did he evade the question? By saying it's chala. No, the goat is so healthy that the goat can carry me and you together. Here's where I want to read the Rashi. Let me find the Rashi over here. Yochel laharkiv, there's a bach hey in the Rashi, one line under it. Yochel laharkiv aniva atem, bari v'chazek hayasoy laharkiv oisiv eschem olav. So what kind of answer is that? They asked him a question, if the goat becomes sick, can you carry it? No, the goat is healthy. Lekama namrinon, Rashi, shaloi haya chafetz lahashiv al she'ilasan. Even though he knew the answer. No, so Rashi wants to make it clear. Why? Masha leishama mipi rabbi. So he would evade the question. Now let's go back in the Gemara. Amar lohem. I'm sorry. Next question. Chala is what they asked Rabbi Eliezer. Chala mishalchoi, not tamei. Chala mishalchoi. Ma'u sheishlachenu biyad acher. We know that ish iti means that it should be pre-designated, but is that essential or is that not essential? If he cannot do it, now what? What, you're not going to do that avoida? And again, maybe you don't do that avoida. Nachamal, for sure, Leshitas Rabbi Yehuda, that even the vidui on the soira mishtaleich is not essential, which means anything afterwards is also not essential. So maybe it's not essential. So why? So either do it properly or don't do it. Amar lohem, and he evaded the question. Eha b'shalom ani va'atem. Me and you should be in peace. Peace, man. Who says Rashi, loy ani v'loy atem niskak l'shiluchay. Don't worry about it. Me and you don't have to send them. Now, why did he call that we'll be at peace? It's mashma like the Midrash. In other words, they knew that whoever will be the one taking the goat won't be in peace that year. They'll pass away. So all the Rabbi Eliezer is saying, well, I won't take him. You won't take him. Zog zechlish. We are good. He evaded the question. Third question that was asked of Rabbi Eliezer. The chafoi, I know we're not up to there yet in the Mishnah, but we'll get there soon. So when they got to the cliff, so the ish iti pushed him off the cliff. Now the goal was for him to become dismembered. So the question was, if the chafoi v'loy meis, the goat didn't die. So what happens now? Is the avodah done, lucky goat, or does the goat have to die? Which would mean he has to go down the cliff and kill him. The chafei v'loy meis, ma'u sheyered achra v'yimisenu. So amar lahem, kein yoivdu kol yevech Hashem. Don't forget the sword represented klipa, the oivim of the oibishter. Now here it's already a little bit like kill it. But again, didn't answer clearly. Kein yoivdu kol yevech Hashem. Now the Chachamim who were asked the same questions, they responded clearly. They didn't evade, either because they heard it mirabban, and more, this was a unique ethic of Rabbi Eliezer. That even though when he knew the halacha, he didn't want to answer it. The Chachamim, the general Chachamim don't have such a luxury. When a Yid asks a question, someone has to answer clearly. Rabbi Eliezer says, listen, anyways, ich bin the shamuti, no one is listening to me halacha l'maisa. So he left it to the Chachamim. Chachamim like this. Question number one. Chala, the din is, like we learned above, MERCAVA al ksefoi. Next, for the next question, that if the ishiti became ill, yishalchenu b'yad acher. Now I'm wondering, and if he's tamei, it's not clear. In other words, once you say that you can send it b'yad acher, so if he became tamei, what would the Chachamim hold? Should he go into the azara, which is normally a violation, or no, get someone else? I don't know. Number three, the chafai v'loy meis Clearly, Yedid Achra v'Yemisanonai. Again, I understand that Rabbi Eliezer really answered that, but not by completely evading, but by just not saying it clearly, because when he says, Kein yoivdu kol levach Hashem, what is he talking about? He was referring to know that the goat has to die. Okay, weiter. Now that we mentioned this way of evading answers, we're going to go off topic of Yom Kippur. Sha'alu es Rabbi Eliezer. Ploini ma lo'ilam haba. Ploini ma lo'ilam haba is so-and-so. Let's go with Rashi. Rashi says, the Yesh Paisrim, that they asked him regarding Shlomo ben David. Why would we even think that Shlomo, God forbid, is not ben Olam Haba? So we had this whole sugya. Remember in Gittin, there was a relative to the level of Shlomo HaMelech. He definitely had a Yerida. Not only that, he was expelled, whatever that means. If you remember the whole story with Ashmedai, maybe he never even returned. V'chulei. So Amar Lohem, plural, he told them, what? Loishi iltuni ella al ploini? Why don't you ask me on Avshalom? You're asking me on one son of Shlomo. What about, that's the way Rashi teaches. Are you asking me regarding Avshalom? He understood what they're asking him. Again, he evaded the question, what's with Shlomo? Yeah, what's with Avshalom? And if they asked him, what's with Avshalom? He said, what's with Shlomo? They know he's not answering this question. The next question they asked him, Ma'u lahatzil roya kivisa min ha'ari. Now the literal meaning is, can a shepherd save the lamb from a lion? Look inside Tosfos. What did that mean? Koloimed, right? The third Tosfos. Batsheva. The Batsheva, that was the whole mashal of Nasan Hanavi, right? God is shining His light at me over here. Good. That Batsheva was the lamb. That was the whole musar that Nasan gave David HaMelech. And you're the wealthy guy. You're the lion. Oh, so what salvation are we talking about? Batsheva miyad David mi sfirolon da Amar Rabbi Yonis b'Masechtas Ksubas. That call ayotzel l'mechamis beis David get krisus kaisav leishtoi. And if that is indeed what happened, so Batsheva was not a married woman, because Uriah wrote a get to Batsheva, which means that the failing of David was on a much different level. There was no halachic adultery at all. So that's a reference to the story. Okay, stop. Keep your finger in Tosfos. So that's what they asked him. Can you save the lamb from the lion? Was Batsheva, did she needed saving or not? Was there an isur of having that? Was she a married woman or not? So again, he didn't want to answer explicitly. So Amalahem, but Loishi Eltuni, you're not asking me, Ella ala kifsa. Forget about the roya. Only focus on the lamb. Why don't you ask about her? Like ask, is she married or not? Only ask on the lamb. So then they replied, Ma'ula hatzil horoya min ha'ari. They asked him another question. Can we save the shepherd from the lion? That's what we were asking. We're not focusing on Batsheva. We want to know whether you can save the roya from the lion. Again, the lion is David. Who is the shepherd? If the kivsa is Batsheva, so here's Tosfos says beautiful. Ma'ula hatzil horoya mi'adori koloimer. That Uriah, the husband, David HaMelech basically sent Uriah to die. Mahu lahatzil Uriah miyad David. Was it right that Uriah was sent to die, to go to the fronts? What's the question? Why would Uriah be chayev misa or not? Mi sviralon cholkin kaved letalma mamakim arav. And Uriah was not a moed of the malchus, as Tosfos will remind us, because he told Uriah, go home to your wife, and he says, I'm not going home to my wife when all of my colleagues are out there in battle. Oy dilma ein cholkin. Uriah's refusal to listen to David was considered merida b'malchus, right? And what is the issue? The issue was simply because the general was Yoav. And when Uriah was speaking to David, he called Yoav, my master Yoav. Not because he didn't go home with his wife. Simply referring to Yoav as Adoni in front of David. So Yoav is the Talmud, David is the Rav. Cholkin covered l'talma makam arav gavaldik. So they asked him that. So Amar lahem loishil tuni ella al haraya. You never asked me about the shepherd. In other words, whatever he asked about David, ask me about Batsheva. So they asked about Batsheva, ask me about Uriah. Like before, like Rashi, what's with Shlomo? What's with Avshalom? Why don't you ask me? Or are you asking? He focused, he diverted. Ask me about something else. So whenever Rabbi Eliezer said, ask me about something else, they understood he's not answering. Our next question, unrelated. Mamzer ma'u lirash. Is a mamzer yoirish? So he answered, ma'u liyabim is a mamzer, does a mamzer do yibum? Now guys, we learned all these dinim. And he never heard that from his Rebbe. Next question, there is a din which many people practice ad hayoim hazeh, especially when you build your house. Prior to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, there is one area in the house that you leave unplastered. Many Hasidic people are very makbid on this, and what they do nowadays is instead of peeling off the plaster, you have these beautiful paintings that they don't put on a frame, they stick it onto the wall. It mamish makes your wall look like that here you peeled off some plaster and you see a couple of bricks underneath it. And they put it near the entrance. God's house is not built, my house is not built. So he asked, Ma'u lasid as basic, could you now plaster your house? Or do you have to subscribe to this? Or can you properly plaster your house? That's what they asked him. So what did he answer them? I have another question. Can you plaster a grave? Do you need to plaster a grave? What's the plastering of the grave? I mean, nowadays we have proper matzevas, but it used to be that the way they marked where someone was buried was by putting a certain amount of lime. If you remember, that's the whole Maisa in Bava Basra, right, of Rav Bana'ah, that he would go and be boidik the graves and properly re-put the lime, which can get washed away with rain or with the earthquake. What about plastering homes? What about plastering graves? He asked another similar question just to evade answering. And the Gemara says, on all of these statements of Rabbi Eliezer, that loy mipnei shehefligon bidvarim, be maflik bidvarim means that sometimes when people don't know what to answer, so they evade the question that way. And that was not Rabbi Eliezer. If he did not know the answer, he would say, I don't know. He wouldn't dray them a cup. Why did he change the topic? He knew the answer, but he couldn't say it. If something he never heard from his Rebbe, he never said the answer. He had his opinion, but he didn't respond to it. Weiter, let's hop another few lines. Sha'ala isha chachama. Es Rabbi Eliezer. Ma'achar shemaiso ha'egel shavin. Right, the Egel Azov was idolatry. And yet we find, like we mentioned in the intro, some people died b'sayif, some people died b'magefa with the plague, and some people died by drinking the waters. And that's called hidroiken. Hidroiken is some sort of internal swelling. Remember, whether it's from the stomach, whether it's from the throat. So how did he evade the answer? Amalah, ein chachma leisha ela bapelach. That there's no wisdom to woman save her knowing how to spindle, how to weave. Let me explain to you what that means. This is not a spin. Is that chachma, men come from chachma, women come connected to bina. Av and aim. And the vort of bina is the koyach to differentiate between one and the other. Bain, bina. And that was exactly, he remarked how her question is a woman's question. In other words, generally, chachma, when you have everything in a nekuda klalis, everyone was chayav misa. But this desire to understand why some people died like this, why some people died like that is a unique woman's question. And that's taka the whole chachma of weaving. What is weaving? You take different types of threads and you weave them together. And the more bina you have, the better job you'll do, is because you're taking many, and one thread has to be thicker, right? There's the shesi, there's the edev, there's a whole chachma which is predicated on you knowing how to differentiate. So he acknowledged, it's like he tells her that's a great question. He didn't answer the question, not because he didn't know, but because shalisham and pirabai. Now what's the v'cheinu aimer v'chol ichma chachma slave b'yadel tavu. Now even though the Torah uses the words chachma, but that works because, like it says in Sefer Yetzirah, v'havein b'chachma, v'chakam b'vina. Okay, now Itmar, Rav Levi, this is the answer. Chadomar, like this, that those who were zibach, means they shachted, those that were kiter, that they burned ketoiris for the egel, so they were killed b'sayif. I know it's late so quickly. So Rashi points out, one second, these are the four main avodas for which you chayiv skila. Zokt Rashi, that even though we learned in Sanhedrin skila, the first Rashi under the Gemara, but this was before that detail was given. Before that detail was given, that's a bona fide act of idol worship, then sayif. Back in the Gemara. Those that were gipeif, those who embraced the idol, the hug the idol, those that vinishik, that kissed the idol, since it's not the ikar avoida, so they're not going to be chayiv misa. So then b'misa means with a plague, God killed them. Those that didn't do any action, but they were samach b'levavai, they were happy that this terrible thing was happening. So simcha without action is an internal sin. So they were punished with an internal punishment, and that's hidroikin. Because hidroikin is that there's an inner swelling, gavalik. So that's one of the two. V'chad amar, like this. Those who were warned, so we know that they knew, but they were, those that were witnessed, but they were not forewarned. But God knew that they knew they're sinning, then they got killed by Misa, which is with the plague. Was behadroiken. And let's slate this chap until the list of two dots. Omar Rabbi Yehuda. None of them participated, as it says in Parshas Kisisa. And the vav and the v'gaimed is essential. Vayoymed mi Lashem Elai vayei osvu elav kol b'nei Levi. None of the Levium sinned. Yosef Ravina v'kam lo shmaitza. So Esvei b'nei Rav Papa bar Abba l'Rabiana. I'm sorry, l'Ravina. What are you talking about? In Zois HaBracha, when Moshe gave a bracha to the Levium, so he says that they said to the father and the mother, I have never seen you. In other words, that there were times that a B'nai Levi killed his own father and mother by making believe as if he never saw him, or to remember to his brothers that I what's the lashon? Ula achiv loy. I don't recognize you. Loyre Isif, Shkoyach. No, Loyre Isif is Ava Ve'imoy. Ula Achiv, whatever. So they killed, if a Levi killed his father, so that means a Levi sinned? No. Answers the Gemara, a father can mean a grandfather, and a Levi can have a Yisrael grandfather, Me'imoy. Ava Ve'imoy. Ava means Ava Ve'imoy Yisrael. Brother means Echav Me'imoy Yisrael. Echav Me'imoy Me'Yisrael. Upa. Now that has to be understood, because in other words, it's his uncle, it's his mother's brother that you can call it.
His mother's kids that are his half brothers. So
his mother's, thank you, that's better. Okay, his mother's kids that are his half brothers, so they're Taki Yisrael and Banav. A person can call the grandkid a child, B'nai Bita Mi Yisrael, and no one from Shevet Levi sinned. Chaver to be continued.